really thrilled to start this meeting because it's been postponed twice. And I'm very pleased to have our three state legislators. We have Senator Vinnie DiMacedo, who's come all the way from Plymouth, David Vieira.
Ooh, all the way from Plymouth. All the way from Boston today, but
Even more.
yeah.
And we have it on Tuesday instead of Thursday because the Senate meets on Thursday. We have David Vieira, who's been representing part of Falmouth and other areas for several years, and our new state legislator, our new representative, Dylan Fernandez, who represents the other part of Falmouth and a whole bunch of other places. I have to go into the infomercial. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan but political organization, encourages informed and active participation of citizens in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. That means lobbying. We're nonpartisan in that we do not support or oppose specific candidates or office holders. And as an example, we have candidates night Thursday, 2 nights from now, in this very room for all of the candidates seeking town office. We're political in that we may support or oppose issues that we've studied and come to consensus on. So when we lobby, we do it in an informed way. The league is organized like our government, or local, state, and national. And tonight, our local league is focusing on state issues. Finally, I want to say that membership is open to anyone 16 years of age or older, 16, including them. Membership materials are on the table by the door, and our membership chairman is Jackie Baxter. Jackie, if you would just, where's Jackie? There she is right there. She's raised her hand. And finally, I want to introduce Meg Borden, who is our second vice president, and she will facilitate our meeting.
Okay. This is something we started several years ago. It's supposed to be a very casual conversation with our state legislators. As you can see, it's kind of grown a little bit beyond casual, but I want to try and keep this as casual as possible. And the reason I'd like to do that is because I want everyone to feel that they have access to their state legislator, and this is an opportunity where they're really not up on a podium, that everyone can be approachable and we can ask questions that you may want to ask.
Does that mean I have to take my tie off now? Or?
Yes, that would be a good idea. Ties off would be fine. I would like to start by asking, the way a lot of the work gets done up at the State House is in committee. And we're very well represented here on the various committees on the State House. And I'm going to ask each of the legislators to speak a little bit about their committee work. And that'll be their sharing, and then we'll open it up for other people to ask any question they'd like to ask. And when we do the questions, I'm going to ask that you come up to the microphone unless you're not able to, and just kind of motion, and I'll bring a microphone to you. Okay, I guess we'll start with David because he's used to this.
Well, Meg, thank you. I remember when it was just a small circle in the basement of Town Hall. So it's great to see that this program has grown over the years. Last year was the first year that we got a little more formal, being up at a table and all. But it's nice to be able to sit down and have a conversation, which I know we'll get to shortly here. But for committees, so I've had the opportunity now, starting my 4th term, to serve on a series of committees that have rotated around, starting with public safety and education and tourism. Then I went on to the Ways and Means Committee. And in the last term, I took a leadership position in the minority party as the ranking member of the bonding a capital assets estate expenditure committee. And so when you think of the nightly news and you hear about MBTA and you hear about Chapter 90 road money that's tied up right now in the Senate, we'll deal with that tomorrow.
tomorrow.
When you hear about that, that's a lot of the work that I've been doing on the committees now. I'm still the ranking member of Public Safety and Homeland Security, but that committee has not met yet in a committee format for the beginning of this legislative session. All of the energy has been focused on the budget, getting the budget out, and dealing with our Chapter 90 and our bond bills. How many of you have ever been to the courthouse in Barnstable, down in Barnstable County? Many of you. I won't ask you why, but many of you have been there. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts hasn't had a judicial bond bill come through the legislature since 2008. That was before I was elected to the legislature. And we are at the end of the spending capacity of the 2008 bond bill. And for those of you that have been to Barnstable, you may have waited in line for a period of time. If you were in the Superior Courthouse, you may have seen something that I think is atrocious to happen in a democracy. We have female detainees chained to radiators in the hallway and in benches because we don't have holding capacity while they're awaiting their trial. And so we need to upgrade the facilities in Barnstable. We need to consolidate, I believe, the facilities. We have the probate court is in one area, we have the district court, we have the Superior Court. And just 2 weeks ago, the trial court that we've been working with has announced the capital investment plan that they have, and it includes a new courthouse for Barnstable County, which will be a consolidated courthouse in the village in what they call Phase 3. There's 3 phases. So over the next few months, we will be working with the judiciary to take their capital plan and to create a bond bill to come for authorization in the legislature. It will include in Phase 1 money for the Falmouth and Orleans district courts to make sure that we bring up those facilities so that they're ADA compatible. We do have some access issues in those 2 facilities. And then in the long-range plan is looking at the building of a consolidated criminal justice center in Barnstable Village. The goal is to hopefully build the new facility while the existing facilities are operating, and then to be able to remove the probate court, remove the district court, and do some historic renovation on the Superior Courthouse, which was the historic courthouse right on Route 6A. So the other one is the boring one. For those of you that know me as town moderator, it's the Rules Committee, and so that's a committee that does a lot at the beginning as we get the rules ready. And we have our joint rules for this legislative session, and now there's not a lot of work on the Rules Committee except for late file bills. The committee decides which bills move out of committee and move forward. So that's what we're working on right now in our committee, my committees, and I'm looking forward to the Senate this week authorizing the Chapter 90 bill so that we can get that money back to Falmouth and our towns to do our roads and bridges. As you see on Main Street here, the tar shops are open and they're starting to pave again, so we need to get that money out of Boston into our community so we can fix our roads and bridges.
Thank you, David, and we will be meeting on Thursday to deal with the Chapter 90 funding. So, and it's for those of you who have any interest in state politics. We won't be meeting in the Senate chamber. This will be the first time. The Senate chamber is going to be closed for renovation, so we're actually meeting in Gardner Auditorium, which is kind of a change. So you have a beautiful Senate chamber that's going to be off limits for the rest of the legislative session up for the next 2 years, and so we're going to be meeting in room 428, and so the Senate will be meeting there, which kind of crazy, but you know, that place is, for those of you who've had the opportunity to see the Senate, we've in real need of repair over the years. So what I've been working on in regards to the legislative process is, first, in the Senate, small, you know, it's a smaller body. You have 160 members in the House. In the Senate, there's 40. And so what the Senate President did, again, this start of this legislative session, is he renewed this whole idea of Commonwealth conversations. And so we, as a Senate, have been traveling around the state to Western Massachusetts, to Central Massachusetts, to Northern Massachusetts. We were here on Cape Cod as well, and bringing, you know, all of the different legislators around from the Senate to get a feel for what's happening in different communities and what the priorities are around the state. And so that's just recently finished up. And what we are dealing with now is two major issues. One of them is the Marijuana Policy Commission, a committee that I serve on, and we've been taking testimony in regards to the new bill, the new legislation that was recently passed legislatively, and now, by the voters, and now we're trying to do the fine tuning of it. So that's actually happening now. We're having those hearings. Still a ways away from getting any type of legislation together. It's really taking in testimony, and as that's going to progress, and I have the privilege of serving on that committee. The next big issue that I serve on is I serve on the Committee on Ways and Means. Ways and Means, I know most of you know, but the way that is for those of you who don't know, that's the committee, and Dave had served on it at one point. It's the committee that deals with the funding of state government, the $40.5 billion. Everything kind of goes through this committee, and you deal with all of the different ins and outs legislatively, and that's a challenge right now because for those of you who've been kind of paying attention, Massachusetts revenues have not been meeting what we've anticipated and hoped for in regards to what they call benchmark. And benchmark is when you anticipate next year's revenue, you believe that it's going to be X amount of dollars, and if it's less than that, then that doesn't meet benchmark. And we have been in a situation like that. And so this entire year, we're getting close to $300 million. Well, not 300, but 200 and some odd million dollars below benchmark right now. And I just left a meeting at 4 o'clock with the governor, and it doesn't look like the month of April is going to be higher than benchmark, which means we're still below benchmark. So at the end of this year, if we don't get higher, we're going to be in a deficit as far as revenue goes, which is a big concern for us, because if we're $250 million down for what we anticipated in this year, that means we're starting next year's budget, which we're debating now, and they just finished debating in the House, and we're going to be debating in the next few weeks in the Senate. We're going to have to start $250 million lower than what we thought right off the top. And if you're $250 to $300 million low, I'll just give you an understanding of our anticipated revenue growth for the Commonwealth next year is about $1.1 billion. If you take $250 million right off the table, as you know, obviously now you're starting lower, $700 million of that goes directly to Mass Health. So that is the big budget buster, and that's because Mass Health has continued to grow. It's now 30% of the population of the Commonwealth is on Mass Health, and so the costs are continuing to increase there. So that now leaves $200 or $300 million left for the entire state budget to address Chapter 70 funding, education funding, to address the environment, to address all of the other things in public safety that we do in government. And when you think of about a $40.5 billion budget, not a lot of revenue to deal with. So that's really kind of been the challenge that we're dealing with. We have 3% unemployment. Virtually everyone that was looking for a job can find a job. Now, maybe not paying what they were, but that's how it's going. It seems like the economy's moving. I think if you look around, things are active. You drive into Boston, there are so many cranes up. You would think that things are going great, but the revenue has not met the projections that we had hoped for. And the governor was sharing with us today, we had a little caucus, and he was kind of sharing what the Federal Reserve was saying and why they think this is, because it's kind of odd with everything happening, everything seeming like it's going, confidence is up in regards to the economy. Why is it that it's not coming? And it says one of the main drivers is the fact that the things that we buy, sales tax, it hasn't increased in value. So basically we're seeing about 2% increase in sales tax, but it's still not enough to do everything we do. Income tax is up a little bit, but we're expecting to grow by 3.5%, not 2%, 2.5%. So that's kind of the I know it's probably somewhat boring, but you want to know what I do. This is what I deal with, and it is the budget things, because when the revenues aren't meeting, we have no choice. And as you know, I don't know, the governor not too long ago had to cut $98 million out of what they call 9C cuts. He's constitutionally required, if you do not meet revenue projections, to cut agencies under his purview. And so that happened, which hurt a lot of local areas with different issues. And so that's kind of the big elephant in the room right now, because if April's not a good month, and April's one of the big months because that's the month that everyone pays their taxes, as you know, and if those numbers don't come in, May and June aren't as big a months. And so if it's just benchmark, we're going to be in a position where we could be $250 million less in revenue. And so that's just that's kind of the concern, because if we are short, you can't cut anymore because it's too late to cut into the different budgets, which means we have about $1.3 billion in a rainy day fund. Well, it's very concerning to bondholders if we get below $1 billion in our rainy day fund. That could very well be a possibility. If we get below $1 billion and they lower our bond rating, what ends up happening is it's like your credit being lowered, and that means when you go and bond for Chapter 90 or you bond for school building assistance, the cost goes up. So it's like getting a 3.5% mortgage. Now you're going to be paying 5.5% mortgage because they don't feel that you're in a solid financial position. So those are the challenges right now that we're kind of facing. And I serve on a whole host of different committees as well. Tourism committee, I'm on the bonding committee as well. But the big two that I've been working on in this short window of time in the beginning of this legislative session have been those two committees. And so now I'll turn it over to you.
Well, first of all,
I'm sorry.
if there's anybody out in the hall, we still have 1, 2, 3 seats in here if you'd like to come in.
Standing room only, I love it.
It would be a good point to come in right now.
Come on in.
Okay, Dylan.
Good. Well, thank you to the league for hosting, and thank you to David and Vinny for being here as well. I'm on the other side of the aisle, but we work very closely together on a lot of issues across the Cape and Islands, and David and Vinny are terrific partners to work with, and they care deeply about our local communities and care deeply about Falmouth. So it's a pleasure the past couple months getting to know you guys and working with you. So when I was thinking about committees and what committees that I wanted to be on, what committees that I was going to request, I thought about the needs of our local community and what I view as kind of the most acute needs for Falmouth, and I also represent all of Martha's Vineyard, all of Nantucket, and the Elizabeth Island chain, so you can't forget about Cuttyhunk. When I was thinking about kind of, what are the core issues facing our region, to me those are issues of environmental stewardship, environmental degradation, nitrification of our water quality issues, kind of global warming, climate change pieces. And then we also have a really strong need around kind of addiction issues, substance misuse. The opioid and heroin epidemic has been ravaging our local communities. A lot of people that I went to school with, a lot of people that Brett went to school with, have been suffering from that disease. And unfortunately, we know people who aren't going to be coming back from it. And so mental health and substance misuse issues, I think, are really kind of core issues in our district. And also affordable housing. I mean, lack of affordable housing is making it so that young people like myself really struggle to live here, but also working families. When I take the boat over to the vineyard in Nantucket, the boat is just full with workers in the morning. And then usually when I was out campaigning, I take the boat with them in the morning, and then I catch the boat coming back with them. And the boat is just full with construction workers and other workers who just can't afford to live on the islands, but also can't afford to live in Falmouth. A lot of workers have to come over the bridge to find work. And also our seniors. Our seniors who want to downgrade, or our seniors who are struggling to pay the property taxes on our homes, whose values that rose dramatically over the years. And so when I looked at those kind of 3 core issues: environmental stewardship, affordable housing, substance misuse, and mental health, I requested committees that address those issues. So I requested the committee on the environment and agriculture and natural resources, and I requested the committee on mental health and substance misuse, and now recovery. They had recovery this year. And also requested the committee on municipalities and regional government. And I got all three, which I was kind of surprised about. Only freshman rep to get all three committees that he requested. And I said, you know, municipalities and regional government, how does that deal with housing issues? Well, one bill that we're working on from Nantucket, which is a home rule petition. So all the home rule petitions, all the local bills go through the municipalities committee. And so it's a really good way to be able to track the bills that have been filed locally. And Falmouth files some home rule petitions. David and I are going to be filing two that Falmouth filed, but the islands file a ton of home rule petitions, like kind of an absurd amount. And it's because they don't meet, you know, they're islands, right? So they don't, a lot of times they don't meet kind of the cookie cutter state model that some state policies do, so they have to file their own particular home rule petitions. And I'm also the only rep, because of this crazy district, that represents 3 counties. Right? So I have 3 sheriffs. I have 3 county governments. Talking about budget, we got 3 sheriffs calling me asking for money. So this is a really important committee to be on, especially with the district that I represent, and the housing bills that we filed around home rule petitions go through this committee. And so those are 3. The last one I'm on is the committee on redistricting, which is an interesting committee. Basically, after the census, there's a redistricting process that goes on based on population shifts. And so this is a committee that right now will be doing research into how different areas and different populations have grown or shrunk and the like, and which districts kind of make the most sense. I hear it's a very powerful committee to be on in a couple of years, because a lot of reps don't want their district to be changed. So if I keep getting elected and stay on the committee, I think that'll be a good one in a few years from now.
Okay, I'd like to entertain questions right now. Please come up to the mic. And when you do come up to the mic, if you just say your name, and then go on with your question.
Hi, my name is Sarah Flynn. I live here in Falmouth. And I wanted to ask you, Senator DiMacedo, about Senate Bill 1225, which is the act relative to end-of-life options. And for those who don't know, it's an act that permits mentally competent adults with a prognosis of 6 months or less to receive a prescription from their physician to end their suffering, should they so choose. And there are many safeguards built into this bill. And you probably know that Falmouth endorsed a similar initiative in 2012. And recent polls show that 70% of Mass residents support this bill, and or the whole concept of medical aid in dying. It's been authorized in Oregon since 1997, and in that state it's increased the use of hospice and palliative care and improved the well-being of terminally ill people and virtually eliminated the risk of suicide. I personally know someone who committed suicide rather than live the rest of their life because of their cancer. So given this bill's potential to improve end-of-life care and its widespread support across party and religious lines, could you tell us why you do or don't support the bill? Thank you.
Certainly, and this is, one of the challenging issues when you're in the legislature that you have to come across and deal with, and I struggle. I have been in a situation where I lost a sister probably 7-8 years ago to cancer, and I know the challenge and the pain that she had suffered with, and it's a challenge. But I also have a very difficult time personally justifying that it's a very difficult issue as a legislator to make that decision, and I know that for some people are very comfortable with that issue, but I am not. I'm not. I feel the issue of life is a big deal, and and I'm not in a position as a legislator that I feel comfortable there. I think that it's maybe people are coming around to that. I'm just not. I just don't stand it as far as somebody who's realizes this is, life and death issue. This is, generally I got in the legislature, and there are issues that I deal with, and, when it comes to finances and business and economy, and of course as the opiate issue. These are things that you get into, and because you're trying to help make things better. And I struggle with this issue. I really do. I'm not 100% in opposition, but I'm not 100% in favor either, because I know this is a challenging issue, and it will be debated, and as it gets debated, maybe I'll come to a different conclusion. But at this particular juncture, I'm not 100% in support of the legislation of helping people make that decision to take their lives, because it's just, I'm concerned about the slippery slope, because I know there's situations where people will do this, but I also fear the slippery slope aspect. So I appreciate the question. I know it's an important issue for a lot of people, but for me personally, it's something that I'm still not there yet at this point.
Would anyone else like to?
This question came up at the last session that we did a year ago, and since then, Dr. Kligler and his group have gone and fought with the Medical Society to fund a comprehensive survey of the Medical Society in Massachusetts. And I was just asking him when we came into the room, where are we? And there seems to be maybe some feet dragging in leadership there, because maybe leadership made a decision about the stand of the society in the past, but they're still moving forward with that. And so I'm very interested to see how that survey's rolled out and the results of that, to hear the latest and the greatest from the medical community. I still, as the senator I'm still uncomfortable with the legislation. I understand that there's this time horizon of so many months after a second opinion, but we know, as anyone in the medical community knows, that it's not an exact science. And so as we sit down and have a time horizon of, we believe that within the next 6 months that you're going to die from this disease or this situation that you're in, what happens with medical advances over those 6 months? What happens with different type or regimens of care that are unknown to us now to be triggers to extend the life? And if in month 2 of that 6-month horizon, someone decides, I want to end my life now, and in that 4-month period, there's another breakthrough. And so I'm still uncomfortable because it's not an exact science. If it was an exact science and we knew this was the day it was going to end and everything's going to be bad from here to there, if that was an exact course of action, I might feel differently where I am now. But I am proud that the doctor has taken the stand to say, we want to hear from the whole medical community, because folks like us in Boston are hearing from the society. And now we're hearing that maybe the society is not representing all of the members of the medical community. And so I'm very interested and want to sit down with that data when it comes back and take a second look at it.
Dylan, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I fully support it. Yes. Is this on? Okay, great. So I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. I fully support the bill. I see Dr. Kligler here tonight, and I think I just want to praise Dr. Kligler for being a real advocate on this issue and really taking a stand and getting some pretty incredible press. It seems like every week I open the Boston Globe, I see a local face in it. To me, this is a pretty simple issue. I was surprised it failed in 2012. I voted for it then. I'd absolutely vote for it again. And when you looked at 2012 and looked at kind of the places it failed, it failed in some predominantly Catholic areas. But I think, as a society, we've moved on from them. We've learned a lot more about the issue. I don't think anyone who is suffering an incredible amount of pain from a terminally ill disease should not have what I look at as a very humane option. And so it's something I fully support and co-sponsor and look forward to advocating for.
There's an opportunity to come and sit in these chairs that are here. Anybody that's standing up in the back.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Cohen. I live in Falmouth. Thank you, Representative Fernandez, for being a co-sponsor on the Safe Communities Act. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe Senator de Macedo and Representative Vieira can speak to support or lack of support, or what you see that needs to be changed in order to pass some sort of legislation there.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So the Safe Communities Act, if folks aren't aware, is basically an act that says that local law enforcement will not basically play the role of an ICE officer in reporting immigration status unless there's kind of a deeper criminal issue there. I believe it's a felony. They would be able to report a felony. To me, I'm, my parents, or not my parents, my family immigrated here. We're all immigrants. The only people who are not immigrants in this country are Native Americans or, slaves, right? And so, for me, there's a lot of data out there too. We know that that immigrants are less likely to commit crimes, right? They're less likely. After all this rhetoric about how immigrants are making us unsafe, that's just not backed in data. I mean, and it makes sense, right? Immigrants, especially undocumented immigrants, are afraid of the police, right? They're afraid of getting reported. They're afraid of being detained by ICE. So it's intuitive that they're less likely to commit crime. It's not. You don't even need the data to back it up. And so I support it. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill in the House. There's been some discussion from leadership, Democratic leadership, about not moving forward with the bill and just having it be a local option. Obviously, that's something I oppose, and I'm in a group in the House that's part of the Progressive Caucus, and we sent a letter to the Speaker and leadership advocating for a few bills in the wake of kind of the presidential election. This was one of them. And when it comes to, there's a fear out there from municipal officials about kind of the federal government withholding funds from municipalities and cities and areas that they move forward with the Safe Communities Act. Well, that's unconstitutional, right? And we've seen this start to play out in the courts a little bit, but any constitutional lawyer will tell you can't do that. You can't force a local official to enforce federal laws. And so, yeah, look, I support it. I think we should be protecting our immigrant communities. There's a large immigrant community that I represent, especially on the Vineyard. And over on the Vineyard, many of the municipalities over there have already voted to become sanctuary communities. And that's something that, there's a lot of fear out there right now. A lot of fear, especially among immigrant communities. And I think it shows a nice message that Massachusetts is a place that's a welcoming place and remains a beacon for equality and a beacon for acceptance, not only in our nation, but also shows a message to the rest of the world. Because we've seen how the effect of toxic rhetoric against immigrants can really affect things. And how have we seen that? Well, we've seen a rise in hate crimes that has been documented throughout our country, but we've also seen a reduction in foreigners coming to the U.S. Now, what does that mean for our economy, right? We've seen a 12 to 14% drop in tourism since the president got elected. And what does that mean for the Cape and Islands? Well, for the islands, that means a lot of tourism dollars. And for the Cape too, for the islands, $35 million a year is spent from foreign tourists. 10% of that's a lot of money. And for Barnstable County, I think it's like maybe 120 million. I'd have to check with the chamber, but it's another large chunk of money. So there's huge financial and human and cultural implications to this, and that's why I'm a co-sponsor and supporter.
Well, did you want us to go, or did
You
want to-
can go, Jeff.
Okay. Just to, it's kind of funny here, but we joked about this in the past. You have an entirely Portuguese legislative delegation here today. I was born in the Cape Verde Islands. So it was a colony of Portugal back in the day. So as an immigrant myself, I'm the youngest of 7 children. This has been an issue that I've dealt with quite a bit in regards to immigration policy, and I'm concerned about what we're hearing from the federal government in regards to some of the what is considered as rhetoric and might be perceived as anti-immigrant. Being an immigrant, understanding first generation of what's that like living in this new country, and of course, I love America. I mean, America gave my family, one of 7 children, an opportunity to really thrive and have an opportunity that we otherwise wouldn't have had in a very small island off the coast of Africa. And so I've always been very supportive of immigration issues, and I try to find that balance of how do I take my perspective of being an immigrant and finding that, and also understanding that we are a nation governed under the rule of law, and we do have to, take and make sure we protect the laws that are in place. And I'm very sympathetic to the individuals that are here. They're working. They may have extended their visas. They often call me because, as you can imagine, being an immigrant myself, there's a relationship and understanding, and they are nervous, and I understand that, and I have no desire whatsoever to see, our local police department picking those people up and sending them back. I'm very concerned about that. That being said, I also believe that to ignore someone in a situation, and again, regards to the Safe Communities Act, to say that we don't protect our laws and we choose which laws we're going to do or not, is a dangerous precedent, in my personal opinion, for the state. And so we have to be mindful of this and address these issues. And I certainly am hopeful that we can have a real immigration policy, because we don't have one right now. We've kind of lacked a broader immigration policy in the nation, and that is why people are overstaying their visas and are working here. So I'm somewhere in the middle on this issue in regards to, I'm very compassionate because I've been there and I understand and I want to protect it. However, but there are people that are violating, that have broken the laws in regards to crimes that are, that we have to be mindful of, because we don't want to be in a situation where there's a perception where people come here that have broken the laws and they're not concerned about following our laws. He's correct in regards to the fact that most immigrants that are here that have overstayed their visas are very mindful of and concerned about violating the law, and they're concerned, so they are there. But there are also others that are not, and there are people that are violating, breaking the laws every day that are here, that are here illegally, have come here illegally, and we do have to have, as much as anyone, we can't just totally open up our borders. I know people think, geez, that'd be a great idea, just totally have open borders. But America can't, if we did that and we didn't have an immigration policy, and I just came back from Scotland, very tight. My daughter's been there for a year, and they have a very tight immigration policy. Every other country has an immigration policy that it has to, you have a certain amount of people that you let in, you have to kind of control. If you just totally open up the borders, and I know many people think that's a great idea, but I will tell you, it's a dangerous precedent to try to do that. My parents waited a great deal of time. It was the law that changed in 1965. My grandmother came in 1953, and it wasn't, and all of her children, they brought them one by one because they couldn't afford to come all at once. My grandfather died at sea on his way to America, and so she came to America, and all her children were still back in Cape Verde, and she didn't have the money, so she brought one kid at a time, except for the oldest daughter, which is my mom, who was married, and she couldn't come at that time, and it wasn't until the law changed in '65 that it not allowed for married children to come, and it opened the doors. But they waited and went through the process because they have certain standards, and we need to do a better job of addressing this on a national standard. I've been a big advocate for and probably in opposition to some of the stuff that's going on in Washington about addressing this on a national scale and creating a much better open door policy to allow more immigrants in. But we can't just totally get rid of our immigration policy as a whole. I just think that would, in the long run, it would be a very dangerous thing for the country. You have to have some level of balance. Otherwise, just because of America's wealth, people would be coming from all over the world. And I know it sounds wonderful. I too am an immigrant, but you have to have some level of a balance of immigration policy. And to that, it's trying to find that balance that really has to be addressed at the national level and addressed. And I've reached out to both, at the federal level, I've reached out even to the president's office to say, this is the time. You're the president. You have Republicans in both House and the Senate. If you're serious about an immigration policy, this is the time to address this issue and open the doors and protect those individuals that we hear and that we know that are around here, that we don't want dragged out of this country. And we know that it's impossible to get rid of 11 million people that are here who have overstayed their times in visas.
I'm going to ask the man in the lavender shirt. He's been trying to ask a question. Is it okay if we?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we were all asked to answer the question, so I want to answer the question as well.
Okay.
And I want us to take what we heard early on about whether or not folks that are immigrants commit crimes or are criminals. American citizens commit crimes. They're criminals. We have them in jail. I used to work up there for almost 13 years with Sheriff Cummings. So this talk show rhetoric that we have, that somehow our immigration policy is related to criminal activity in and of itself, I think is ridiculous. The discussion that we should have in this country around immigration policy is what is the capacity that America has to vet individuals coming into our country and to make a pathway to citizenship that's understandable, so you don't have to go spend $5,000 on a lawyer to figure out how you can become a citizen and what you have to do. This should be spelled out. This should be something that anyone who makes through the vetting process and comes to America understands what they need to do to achieve that citizenship, should they so desire. Safe Communities Act is specifically what we were asked about. I cannot support a piece of legislation that tells law enforcement officials not to collaborate with law enforcement agencies and enforce the law. So a lack of a clear immigration policy and a stance, I do not believe should be codified in a law that tells local law enforcement you cannot collaborate. Because in the case of some type of situation, and it particularly comes to mind terrorist situations, where there's collaboration and there's the need for detaining an individual to be vetted, we don't have enough federal agents, nor do we want federal agents at the capacity to be sitting in every one of our communities waiting in case there's a need. And so in the short term, to be able to detain individuals that need to be detained, we need to have the ability of our local law enforcement to collaborate with federal and state officials, if they so choose to. We have chiefs that say, we don't want to collaborate. We don't want to work in this area. We don't want to detain. Well, okay, that's your decision. You're enforcing your state law and your municipal bylaws. If you choose not to play a role in the federal system, just let us know that, so that if we have a situation where we need assistance, we have the right individuals there to provide the assistance. But we at a national level have got to get off of talk radio and get off of this. Somehow immigration has got to do with just crime and criminals. You know, you turn on the news and the one person that doesn't have a driver's license and doesn't have the right papers to be in this country is the one person that you hear about on the news that committed a crime. Meanwhile, there are hundreds of other crimes, similar crimes, that are committed the same day in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and those stories aren't on the news. And it hurts me as a Republican to see the President of the United States begin his endeavor around the immigration issues with outright travel bans, without codifying and spending the time necessary to discuss what is the vetting process for particular countries that we might have concern with. Not outright ban. An outright ban means you don't have enough smart people working for you and you're not doing your job as my president.
Okay.
My name is Oliver Muldoon, and I'm an immigrant, but I got here the easy way. I married an American. All the way from Ireland 47 years ago. Representative Fernandez, I read with interest your recent report in the paper, and I applaud your determination to fight for social justice, which we all associate closely with the term civil rights. On January 20th this year,
Could you come closer to the microphone?
Yeah, sorry. On January 20 this year, Mr. Vieira submitted a bill to protect the civil rights of parents of public school students by requiring that parents give their consent beforehand to certain out-of-school referrals by school authorities. Will you support this bill? And if not, would you explain why social justice is served by voting to undermine the rights of parents? Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. I'll take a look at David's bill. It's honestly the first I've heard of it. But yeah, happy to take a look at it. And
Well, there are,
there's only
in defense,
6,000
there's
bills.
6,000 bills all
yeah,
state
in
now.
defense, yeah, so.
I haven't read all of Dylan's either.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Although
so-
I'm going back right now to read them
Yeah,
all.
yeah. No, I honestly, this is the first I've heard about this bill. There are 6,000 bills that come up in the state house every year. This isn't a bill that's crossed the legislators' desk yet, but I know David and work very closely with him. So looking forward to getting an update from the representative himself.
And this bill, Massachusetts is the only state in the union that has the right to free petition, and so this bill was a petition bill from a constituent that we discussed, and the general principle of having parental involvement with these referrals is very important. I think that if the school is determining that an individual child needs to have outside services, that needs to be in collaboration with the family. It shouldn't be undermining the family, and so we're working with the individual who requested the petition to get a hearing. There hasn't even been a hearing on the bill yet, so.
Actually, I would like someone from this side because I keep looking this way. If you would come up to, yes.
Hi.
I think you might want to come. They can't hear you on TV. Yeah. The television can't pick you up.
I could move that whole microphone next time, couldn't I? And
There
the
are a
whole
couple of
stand.
issues, but one that I found out about that there are just so many issues that you've already raised that I'd love to address. For example, the budget and how our budget is going to be blown already because nobody wants to bring in any more revenues, raise minimum wage, for example. But let me get to my question. I understand that Representative Vieira, you sponsored a bill H1315 permitting firearms transport by non-residents across state lines, so long as the people who want to do this are entitled under federal law to possess those firearms. To me, this raises a red flag of problems with respect to firearms that would be permissible under federal law. I don't know what they might be, but I have a feeling they're dangerous, but not permitted here in Massachusetts. And
It's not the firearm, it's that they're licensed to possess the firearm. The firearm in Massachusetts would still have to be allowable in the Commonwealth. So Sandra, what happens here is you have individuals, particularly sportsmen and women that come to the Commonwealth.
All right.
And we've had cases in Boston where individuals have missed flights. And they're in a position to try to be able to stay in the city of Boston in a hotel, to wait for a day or two to get back on a flight. And yet they're in violation of existing Commonwealth firearms laws, although they have a firearm that is allowed in the Commonwealth. They are licensed, backgrounded, and vetted in the state of which they traveled from, and they were here. Also, the folks that do sporting, like the 4-H out UMass is starting a new
Okay.
program with the shooting sports. Same type of situation. If they're here, they have a firearm that's allowed in Massachusetts. They have the license necessary for it to be able to not be in violation of existing law. Quite frankly, law enforcement's in turning a blind eye to this when these things happen because the law does not have that exemption.
Okay, I think the law needs to be very clear that we're not going to permit people to transport firearms that we do not permit in the Commonwealth across state lines into our state. We should not be supporting the use or the possession of firearms that we do not feel should be in possession of the public.
I totally agree, and
Okay.
the law would not change as to what type of firearm would be allowed in the Commonwealth.
All right, thank you.
Very good point.
Okay, we have someone else from this side.
Hey.
Hi, I want to start off by thanking all of the people up here. You all voted for the Equal Pay Amendment, except for Dylan, he wasn't there.
He called me though and told me to vote for it.
And we now have, Massachusetts now has the most progressive and powerful equal pay legislation in the country. And I also want to thank all three of you because you all have supported housing court expansion, which maybe you will speak about at some point, but what I really want to ask the question about is, I've praised you now I get to ask the question.
I saw it coming.
Yeah, well, there is a bill coming up this year for family medical leave, and it's an important one, particularly for women, because women have all sorts of issues against them to begin with because we tend to work part-time, and we have less income as we go through life, and we could improve women's later lives if they were able to take some time off if they had a sick kid or if they were ill themselves. And as I understand, Senator Spilka's Bill 1048 has been really well prepared, and I would like to get your input on your sense of what you're supporting or not supporting for the Family Medical Leave Act.
I actually just had last week a group of constituents in my office discussing this and looking at sort of the details of how this would play out. One of the concerns that I had in general, and it was just sort of that talking point of the bill, like what's actually in the bill versus what are people talking about, was how do we fund this? How do we pay for this? And so we had this conversation around the very successful workers' compensation program in Massachusetts. I voted for the minimum wage increase a couple of years ago, outside of what traditionally the party would think a Republican would vote for, after saying we need to figure out how do we help offset some of the cost to employers. And what we found was we had a massive, and we still have a large, surplus in the workers' compensation fund. And the scheduled rate increase was scheduled to increase each year for the 3 years going forward. And we had done annual freezes on the rate increases. And so in order to help offset some of the business costs to the increase in the minimum wage, we were able, in the minimum wage law, to get a 3-year schedule freeze on the increase of the rates for the unemployment insurance. And we still have surplus in the fund. And so paying into a fund that can support the leave necessary, because it's one thing to do, the Federal Act, it's you use up your vacation time, you use up your sick time, and then you can still have more time even though you don't get paid.
Right.
Well, you're trying to raise a family and pay your mortgage and everything else, you need some income here, and how do we make that work? And so I'm at the point right now where I'm very interested in the financial mechanics. If we can create a sustainable system like we have with the workers' compensation that will allow us to do I would right up today sign off on expansion of what is the federal guideline, that you use up what is accrued in the system and then it's unpaid after that. But if we really want to be able to pay for that additional time, we have to work out the mechanics.
It's my understanding that work has been being carried forth in her office.
So there are competing economic models that are being looked at, and so the devil's always in the details. But the concept of a sustainable financial program will hinge my final vote on the language that
Okay.
Ms. Spilka has.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy the?
I really enjoyed it. I had the opportunity to go to the Citizens Legislative Seminar. Everybody here should go. It's 2
Well,
days.
we don't have that much room,
And
so.
the bill,
Appreciate it, so.
the bill we worked on was 1048.
Did you? So
Yes,
that-
and so we got to have a mock hearing about that, and so I know a lot more about it than I would have had I not been able to participate. I thank you for that.
I'm glad. And to that extent, there is, as I know Senator Spilka, and I've worked with her, she's the chair of Ways and Means, and I'm the ranking minority member on Ways and Means, so I've worked with her. And there has been, and we haven't dealt with this issue yet, however, they brought it up to you. We have not seen specifically what some of the adjustments were to try to make it more palatable and work together to find a balance. But I think all of us appreciate exactly what you're trying to do as far as legislatively, and we all want to try to do that. And I think that there's a move afoot to try to address this issue where we can find that balance. I know Senator Spilka has been working towards that. I have not specifically seen what.
I can share what I have.
Oh, well, please, please share for everybody. But again, that's where we're trying to get to that balance, because
Okay.
I totally understand the genesis of why we would want to do that and
Thank you.
have that opportunity. But we have to be mindful too. There are people that want to go to $15 an hour minimum wage. There are people that want family medical leave. And all of these things, everything has a cost, and you have to find, how do we find the balance of providing all of these things that are worthy, but at the same token being able to be competitive in a world economy. Whether we like it or not, we serve in a world economy, and these are the issues that I think that we all have to try to find a balance. And I know that Senator Spilka has been working hard towards that, and and I'm hoping that that's something that we can all come to address in this legislative session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I support paid family medical leave, co-sponsor on that piece as well, and
You co-sponsor everything.
I literally.
He's new.
So this is a bill that I care deeply about. I think it's really important for our Commonwealth. A few states already have this. A few of our neighbors already have it. New York, Rhode Island. There might be more since last time I checked. California, states that we're usually a little bit ahead of. So I think we need to catch up in this sense. There already is a national paid family leave act, but that doesn't apply to many people in the Commonwealth. It's roughly, I believe it's around 1 million people, and it's for employees who work for an employer with under 50 workers, right? Think about the Cape and Islands. That's everyone here for the most part. That's many workers here who work for small businesses who really need this law in place, so they don't have to make a choice between going without a paycheck and bonding with their newborn child, or going without paychecks and caring for their dying parent or something like that. So I don't think anyone should have to make that decision between kind of bankruptcy and large financial issues and caring for loved ones and dying ones in their family. So, and this is a bill where I think we really, I would love to see some movement on. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of it. And I do think we need to play catch up with some of our more, with some of our neighbors who are ahead of us.
Thank you.
And just so you know, the Housing Court Expansion Bill had the hearing today. We submitted written testimony.
How'd it go?
I submitted written testimony. I was
Thank you.
in the district today.
Can somebody just tell people what the Housing Court expansion is about, just in a hot minute?
Yeah, we were trying to see if we could actually get some funding for it in the House budget, but they wanted to have the bill go forward, so the lead petitioner for the amendment actually withdrew the amendment. So the Housing Court is a specialty court, so we have drug courts, we have the Veterans Courts now, and Housing Court, and there are some counties like Barnstable, Dukes, Nantucket, somewhere Berkshire, I think is another one, there's a couple out west, counties that don't have this specialty court that intervenes with housing issues, foreclosure issues, and we're seeing great success in the model in the areas where it does exist. Margaret Cooper, who helped organize today, I know Margaret's been very active on foreclosure. Judith Ziss, is she here tonight too? Judith's in the back, yeah. So, we've been meeting in our office looking at these foreclosure issues, and to be able to have another mechanism locally through the specialty court is important, and so we endorse that, and as well as the bills that we've been working on.
Okay, next question.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming.
Closer to the microphone, please.
Yes, I
might have
have
to pull it out.
an injury that we're working on, so if you can't understand me, yell.
We can understand.
Okay. Representative Fernandez, thank you for joining us at the Mariners Park when we had the beginning of our science march. And
He was thanking him for the march.
I can just repeat what you say.
There it goes.
I was thanking Representative Dylan Fernandez for joining us in the Science March this last weekend. And Republican David Vieira, my mother froze my diapers in the wilderness of New Hampshire. We are conservatives. We are conservatives. We don't cut the big trees to pay the liquor bills. I'm not being heard. It's been proposed that nearshore, offshore energy exploration will begin just as soon as 3 days ago when the president made that known. This mimics the incentive that was begun and topped out in 1983. Littorino Offshore, Sapana, hosted the company that brought in a well out on the Georges Bank. They dry holed, but not before breaking off some drill spoil into the Georges Bank fishery. Our coast is some of the most biodiversity rich coastline for fishing in the world. What might we do to build in assurances, guarantees, and oversight if this begins? Because the technology at this time is still not much more advanced than the Santa Barbara blowouts in 1966. Thank you. Did you get that?
About drilling? Or-
Yes, offshore oil and gas prospecting and drilling has been proposed by the president 2 days ago on both coasts, north and south.
So I didn't follow the most recent development, but let me say that in Massachusetts we had last year, last session, a discussion about deep offshore wind and looking at alternative energies. Also in the Cape Cod Canal, being permitted and actually being constructed right now.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, it's
Thank
the
you,
first,
Senator.
first tidal test center in the United States. So we're hoping to get that completed within the next month. That was Seaport Economic Council money that we have here. So continuing to look at the safe, renewable alternatives and to make them come to market and to come to market in a way that is good for energy consumption, but it's also good for consumers is good. I don't know what the president did. I have trouble keeping track of what he's doing lately. So I don't know what just opened up, but any offshore exploration of drilling, in my mind, has to come with sure safeguards of the type of technology that they're going to be using to make sure, as you mentioned, this area. This is why as you know, Marine Biological Laboratory is here, because it's the area where the northern Atlantic and the southern Atlantic meet, and the biodiversity is so rich and heavy here, and we can't kill that ecosystem. And so,
I am a scientist.
Yeah, if we're going to be drilling for oil in areas where we haven't drilled before, then we're going to have some heavy oversight to make sure that it's done in a safe way. I'm not a big proponent of it at this point.
Pardon me, sir. Oversight of this type has to be on-site, either with satellite high-resolution monitoring or drones or on-platform representatives, the way the fishing community is monitored for catch. Sir.
Yeah, well, I too, and I'm not aware of this, so this is new to us. Again, a lot of the stuff that's I've seen over the past, a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing, a lot of frustration that people have been directed at what's been happening at the national level, and we hear that, and we sense the frustration that everybody else is sensing, and we're trying You know, we, as you can see, this delegation is a bipartisan delegation. We work well together. You see the governor of the Commonwealth, who's a Republican, working with a predominantly Democratic legislature, and yet one of the most popular governors in the nation across the line in one of the bluest states, and that's because we work together and we understand our job as legislators is to work together to govern, and it's not about the politics that we see in the frustration that's happening at the national level. I understand, we're hearing it, but I will tell you that we as legislators, despite our Republican or Democratic backgrounds, are really try to do the job of governing and work together. And I can't control as best as we would want to what is happening at the national level. There are things that that happen just clearly concern us, but our job is what can we do to try to make the quality of life better in Massachusetts. And the way that I have done, and I've served in a legislative capacity for 19 years, is about working with people and working together and trying to find consensus and common ground. It's not always 100% my way, but if we can have a conversation and work together, it's not going to be 100% Dylan's way. We work together and find compromise and consensus. This particular, and I only say that in a broader scope because I know a lot of people, and at least what we've been hearing over the past 6 months, is people are frustrated and they're tense about what's happening. I can share with you as legislators and what's happening here in Massachusetts is very different than what you're seeing happen up or down in Washington. I often say this because, and I know this is off the topic specifically to what you're talking about in regards to the officer drilling, which I would be concerned about as well. But I say that there was a time in this country where you had a Ronald Reagan and a Tip O'Neill, two very different people who would battle it out and have different opinions, but then come to a common ground and consensus, and we're friends. And we don't see that at the national level, and I'm sorry that that's the case. I think we see it more here. We understand we have jobs to do and we may represent different constituencies, but we need to find common ground. That's the best interest of this country, and we're not addressing important issues because everyone's looking to pass blame on somebody else. It's your fault, it's this fault. We're not addressing healthcare issues. We're not addressing Social Security. We're not addressing all these big issues that if we came together, we could find common ground. And I'm disappointed. I know for myself, as long as I've been a legislator, I've always tried to find that common ground. Compromise is not a dirty word, in my personal opinion, in regards to politics. It's working together to try to find the best balance for everybody. And
Portland, Oregon has reduced its carbon footprint by 14% with local food, recovering structures within its biodiversity associated network within the town, and built capital and fostered human biodiversity through different classes of folks being employed locally, working locally. Now, the biodiversity that preceded the human race is the natural model of the planet. If we continue to chase capital across international lines or import fruit from miles away and create fossil fuel exigencies.
Thank you. In the interest
Yes,
of
I
trying to let
understand.
some other people talk,
Yes.
I have like 3 people all waiting here, so I'm going
I'm
to
sure
let
of
the next
that.
question.
Right.
But thank you. It was. Thank you for bringing that up, and it was a very good discussion we had. So if we could have the next question. Thanks.
Biodiversity.
And I'll just
Capital.
say briefly, for my generation, for my children's generation, there's not a bigger issue that will face us than that of global warming and climate change. This is going to affect every aspect of our life. It's not just environmental, it's economic. It has huge public safety implications, and we've seen how our military has really made this a core priority as well. And so, David mentioned a really exciting project that we have here locally in exploring tidal energy And that is just a terrific project. And if that's something that's viable, we have one of the best districts to do that in. And then we also have a couple of really interesting projects in my district around the deep water offshore wind 10 miles south of the vineyard in no one's backyard. And this is an exciting project because it's actually the windiest place in America. And so they call it the Saudi Arabia of wind, which is a pretty off message, but we'll roll with it. And so this is a really exciting project. Massachusetts, I can't take credit for it, but Massachusetts, because I wasn't there, but Massachusetts really is pushing the envelope when it comes to environmental stewardship, and we need to continue that. And a big part of that is continuing our solar incentive programs. You know, and this isn't, you know, this isn't all about the environment, right? This is about jobs. This is about our economy. Massachusetts ranks second in terms of solar jobs in the country. We rank 7th in solar output. But I've seen the sun like 2 days this week, right? So we're on the bottom. We're ranked 35th in the amount of sun we get. But we have all these solar jobs, this incredible solar output because of our laws and because of our incredible incentives that we need to advance. Because for me, for my generation, and for my children, this is something that's going to impact us. And for our coastal communities, right, this is something that's going to impact us like no other issue. So we need to continue to really lead the way on this.
Okay.
Now I'm going to have trouble reaching this.
Oh.
Okay. I really thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you being available to us. And my name is Dr. Wendy Bone. I'm a family physician, and I've been practicing in and around Falmouth since 1983, doing a lot of family planning and women's health. And I want to know whether you guys support the access bills. There's 2 of them. The Senate is 449 and the House is 536, which would provide copay and deductible free health insurance to health insurance coverage for prescription contraceptives, which is a provision under Obamacare. But if it is, or maybe I should say when it is repealed, we would like to have that in our state. And 2 big reasons, and to Senator DiMacedo's statement about revenues, its cost. For every dollar spent in family planning services, between $3.50 and $5.50 is saved in cost for health care. And then you're talking about welfare as well, and programs for teen parents, and all that sort of thing. And then the second reason is because, you know, it's kind of a no-brainer, but access to contraception reduces abortions. So abortion rate is the lowest it's ever been in this country right now. So I'd be interested.
I don't think in Massachusetts, it's just federal. That's right.
Ma'am, under the minimum credible coverage guidelines in the state regulation prior to Obamacare or the ACA, it's not included in minimal credible coverage in Massachusetts? I thought it was.
I don't know these.
I think it is.
You know?
Because that's why these 2 bills were filed. Because it's not.
Yeah.
That's why they said it was filed.
So we're not sure either. So this is good that you brought it to our attention, because my understanding was that it was included in the minimum credible coverage. Mr. Fernandez thinks that because the bills were filed, it might not be.
Yeah, I thought.
But some legislators like to file bills to get political attention around an issue. So I want to make sure that it's not actually in minimum credible coverage, because I thought we did that in 2012.
So
Credible coverage applies if the ACA.
Yeah, so the state, we had our, what they called, everybody gets a name for this thing, right? We had Romney Care before we had Obamacare, right? So our Comprehensive Act, over the course of a number of years, we increased the requirements of minimum credible coverage. If your insurance plan didn't have particular coverages, you were not considered on your 1099-HC as having had a credible health plan for the 12 months of the preceding year. So that's one that we need to look at. Yeah.
I also brought you some light bedtime reading.
I think I see 4 people waiting to speak. Is that correct? The back wall? That is probably going to be it because we're going to try and close as close to 9 as possible. So if I could have the next person.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Elias Lieberman, and I have a question for you about House Bill 1190, and I think in the Senate it's 362. This is a bill which would protect Massachusetts lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender children by prohibiting state-licensed mental health professionals from subjecting minors to so-called conversion therapy to change sexual orientation and/or gender identity with a person under 18 years of age. I know was introduced in the House by Representative Khan. Is it a bill that you're familiar with, and do you have feelings about it?
No, yeah, Kay and I worked on it, I'm a co-sponsor. And you sent a letter to my office, which... I'm sorry, yes, so the bill, I wasn't aware of it until Representative Khan, you sent a letter to my office, and I went and met with Representative Khan, who actually has a summer place in Falmouth as well, so I knew her. I said, what's this all about? I'm not familiar with conversion therapy. And so we went through what it was, and the House version, at least, I'm a co-sponsor of.
Happy to know that, thank you.
Sure. Well, just on the previous piece about women's reproductive health care, you know, to take it a step further, I think we not only need free contraception access, but we need to expand access to women's reproductive health care on the Cape and Islands. I mean, there's a huge dearth of access regionally. I mean, I represent Nantucket. I mean, for Falmouth is bad, right? You have to go all the way to Attleboro if you want to get an abortion. But for the islands, right, you got to take an hour-long boat, which sometimes can cost up to $40 just one way. And so there's these huge barriers to care that are really a problem. I think every woman, regardless of their zip code, income, sexual orientation, should have access to affordable, accessible, and safe reproductive health care. So that's a short piece on that. I'm also a co-sponsor of the conversion therapy piece. Really important bill, I think. And when it comes to kind of protecting our LGBT community, I think, you know, Massachusetts has led the way on this, but in some areas we've actually fallen short. It took us a while. I wasn't in the legislature, but I was advocating outside for the trans bill, which basically says we're going to treat transgender people like everyone else in the state. Pretty simple piece of legislation, but something that took a little while to get through the legislature, and that's going to be on the ballot to repeal it coming up, so something to be very mindful of. It actually takes less signatures to repeal a law than it does to take signatures to put a law on the ballot, which I think probably could use some reform as well. But that's going to be on the ballot, so another kind of LGBT fight coming up to be mindful of. So thank you for raising that.
Yeah, again, I don't know about this bill, so it's something that, you know, it certainly sounds reasonable. I don't know. I have to look into that. Again, there's like 6,000 pieces of legislation, but thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay, next person.
Good evening. Even shorter. Good evening. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. First, I'd like to thank Representative Fernandez for co-sponsoring the Safe Communities Act. I wanted to follow up on that discussion because I felt like there were some issues that hadn't been addressed. Senator DiMacedo, I've actually emailed you and I've called your office. My name is Jarita Davis. I haven't heard any response back, but I reached out to you as a fellow Cape Verdean. My grandfather was born on the same island that you were born on. My grandfather is also from Brava in Cape Verde when it was still Portugal. And he came to this country, I think similar to you. He came legally, and when he arrived, he became an American. And he faced a lot of difficulties just because of his differences. So, I mean, he changed his name from Jose to Joseph, and to make other people's lives easier. But that wasn't enough. When he was in school, his name was spelled with an S, and his teacher told me he was spelling his name wrong all his life and had to change it to a Z because that was a proper spelling. So it was just this constant struggle to fit in and to make adjustments, but they are never, ever really quite enough. But he became an American. He loved this country. He married an American. He raised 2 daughters to be fully American. My mother and my sister did not speak anything other than English in the house growing up. And he served this country as a merchant marine, so he was proud of this country and he really contributed a lot to it, the same way you have contributed in your line of office and your service. I'm a little bit concerned about, well, also let me say this, my grandparents were in New Bedford the whole time, so they're right here in the Commonwealth. And they had one of those 2-family, double-decker homes eventually. And he always would rent out the bottom apartment, the rental apartment, to other Cape Verdeans, or, Portuguese, we called them at the time. And, I was told, hey, those people are from the same place that Pup is from. And I said, are they related to us? No, they're not even from the same island. And I thought, because he'd always called it just the old country. It was the old country, the old country. And I said, well, why are you always making an effort to rent to them? And he said, Chickadee, you've got to lift as you climb. Never forget that. That's really important. And at the time, I didn't quite understand because I was, 12. But later I understood that he knew the struggles that they had faced, even as legal immigrants, and the constant judgment and the constant other than. And it was really hard for them even to get a place to rent, even to get a job that no one else wanted to do. They were constantly told no, they constantly had doors being closed in their faces. And so he did what he could because he understood the struggle of being new to this country. And so I know I'm making this personal, but the reason why I'm making this personal is because I think really for a lot of us here in this room, it really is very personal. I think a lot of people who are here in this district are descendants from families that at some point in time were the outsiders. They came as immigrants, as foreigners to this country and had to face so many obstacles. And I feel like the Safe Community Act punishes also those people who are here legally from other countries. There's all kinds of discrimination and it increases the chances of racial profiling. People are more likely to be stopped if they look like they are, in fact, immigrants. And another way in which it's personal is, you talked a lot about the federal level and we have limited reach and a lot of us feel very frustrated and maybe there's not a lot that we can do on the federal level, but we would really like to be able to do something in our own communities. I think that's important to us to try to have a say as to what kind of a community do we want to be. And do we want to be the kind of a community that our grandparents or our great-grandparents had to face when people were closing the doors in their face and saying, no Irish need apply, we don't want your kind here. Do we want to be a community of gatekeepers, or do we want to be a community that supports each other and that lifts as we climb? I mean, who are we? And so it's for that reason that I ask that you really reconsider, because it unfairly targets people who are in fact here legally. I do believe that if someone breaks a law, whether they're a legal immigrant, Native American, born here in the United States, or if they are here undocumented, they should be held accountable, absolutely. But to increase the kind of bias and prejudice and obstacles that a lot of people have to face seems really unfair. So I hope you would speak to that.
Sure. And I thank you very much. First, let me apologize in regards to reaching out to my office. It hadn't gotten to me. I apologize if you'd reached out to me, and it's something I think I've been very good at over the period of time. And this is Lance in my office, so he's going to be making sure that somebody gets back to you. But I don't think you and I have a disagreement, and I know where you come from. My parents still can, my mother does, but my dad is 89 years old and struggles to speak the language. He came at 39 years old. So I know the concern and the prejudices that you talk about, and I'm very mindful of that. And so I've always tried to find that balance. I think I'm pretty well-rounded on this issue in regards to immigration, and I think it's really something I'm very passionate about because I know what you're talking about, and I know it's wrong, and I have always fought against that, and I fought against that discrimination. And my dad, was worked in a company, who obviously didn't speak the language well, and was not treated fairly, and I know what that's like, and I'm very sympathetic to that because it's a personal issue as it is to you, and I will always fight for those people, and I will. We're talking about broader immigration policy and the fact that we haven't had any at a national level that's causing a crisis locally here, and that's a legitimate concern. I want to just make sure that we have a good immigration policy. We make a broader immigration policy. And as I said, I don't know too many people have actually reached out at the national level in regards to making the case about how, and I'm a Republican, as you know, and reached out, actually called someone in the Trump administration and said, and challenged them, said, because he made a point right before a State of the State, if you recall, he said that he was trying to, but the people that were here that were not breaking the law per se in regards to criminals that were that
bad hombres.
Excuse me?
They were bad hombres.
Yes, well, whatever. And again, I just want you to know that that rhetoric bothers me as much as it bothers you, and I'm as concerned and passionate. We come from the same background, so we know where it is. I'm very concerned about it. I'm talking about broader immigration policy that is incredibly important, and I've tried to make that case. I just spoke at Harvard the other day they asked me as a Republican to talk about immigration policy because clearly my immigration policy is different than some of the stuff and the rhetoric that we've heard, and it bothers me. And I'm trying to make a difference in the role that I am as an immigrant, as a Republican, and saying that we can do this better. We're not doing this well, and I'm going to try to address this. This safe community. I think people kind of like broadly sanctuary cities, and somehow that's going to solve this problem. And it's a much broader issue that we have to address. And I'm challenging at the national level. Do something about it. You now control 3 branches. You have no excuse. You can't blame somebody else right now, and that's what I want to see. Because I think if we do that, it will resolve some of the concerns and I hate the prejudice. I really do. And my parents lived it. I know.
I'm sure.
We lived in Dorchester. We moved to, and God bless Kingston. They were very nice. They were my mother loves America. They're wonderful. But it was tough in Dorchester when we first came as immigrants. Right. So I understand that, and I will always be appreciative of that. And I haven't forgotten where I've come from. I'm very, I have been very active. So please forgive me as far as someone not getting back to you. I promise you that we will have this conversation in a broader sense so that you can understand where I'm coming from, because I think you might have a misunderstanding about how I feel about this issue and people like your grandfather who have faced very unfair treatment. It makes me sad, and and I know because my dad lived a lot of that. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I hope that we can have a better
We have
dialogue.
2 more people that I have promised that are going to get to ask their question.
Okay. Well, you guys have had a real workout. My name is Peter Hargraves, so this is the cool down phase. I appreciate the opportunity to hear your point of views, and more than that, I'm really proud and grateful that Falmouth is so well represented in Boston, because listening to your thoughtful comments, even though you disagree, it just couldn't be better. This is a model for America. So I promised you an easy one, and I'm here to deliver that. In the special town meeting that we had in Falmouth on April 4th, Article 2 was passed, which requires special legislation to allow for taxing summer rentals. But I'm interested in 2 aspects of this. It was explained that 2 years ago this was passed but not acted upon. So I'm asking, what are the barriers to doing this, and is there anything we can do for the revenue of Falmouth to help this get done?
Yeah, we'll go and I'll back it up, sure.
So I think we're all in agreement here that we will see action on short-term room rentals, Airbnb tax, as it's colloquially known, sometime in the next year, probably. Certainly this session. So stay tuned, right? So this is really exciting because this is something that's been pushed for a really long time. It's something that just makes sense because it's all about leveling the playing field between hotels and B&Bs and those who rent their homes out for short-term rentals, who aren't being taxed at all. And we've seen the effect on our local B&Bs and our hotels and how many have had to shut down because they're competing with an entire market that's not taxed. And we're talking about revenue issues, right? This would be nice, right? To level the playing field and create equity, but also get some revenue from it. So we're gonna see movement on this year. The person working on this bill in committee in the House is Chairman Michowitz. I actually sent a letter to his office about 2 weeks ago, and it was signed by Senator DiMacedo and Rep. Vieira requesting that he have a hearing on the Airbnb tax on the Cape so that all of us can share our views and our concerns, and so stay tuned on that, on when you can come voice your own personal feelings on this. But this is a bill that's going to really affect our region. It's going to affect every place in the state, but really acutely affect the Cape and Islands. You know, on Nantucket, some of their weekly rentals are about $25,000 a week, right? And if we're going to be paying the state, if Nantucket, if the Vineyard, if Falmouth, if the senator and the representatives districts are going to be paying the state a disproportionate amount of money, I think we should have our voices heard at this hearing so we can share our local concerns. And there's been a little bit of talk locally from our chambers about allocating a piece of either the local funding or maybe it's a piece on top of the 11% tax that would match what exists for rooms and hotels. Maybe there's a piece on top of that, something like we pay at when you go, say, in Boston, you pay a convention fee, right? So there's been a little bit of discussion between the delegation and others about maybe we have our own convention fee, except that goes towards water quality issues, because here on the Cape and Islands we have a $4 billion problem. And so there's been a lot of discussions going on. This is something that's ongoing. It's something that we are going to see movement on. It's something that the speaker has signaled that there will be movement on this. So it's going through the process right now, and hopefully we'll get the chairman to come down to the Cape, and we'll keep you posted so that you can come give your own thoughts on that as well. And
so for a little bit of the historical perspective, Falmouth had a home rule petition a couple of years ago. A number of communities down Cape had it as well. When Pat Flynn was chair of the Board of Selectmen, we had a meeting with the Speaker DeLeo. And at the time, the Speaker had made a commitment, no new taxes, fees, or gimmicks. And he believed that even though this was the leveling of the playing field, as most of the communities discussed it in their communities, he believed it was a new tax, and therefore it was the decision of the Speaker to make sure that this bill didn't come out of committee. The Speaker has moved the mark now to a discussion where he's appointed the chairman. There's an issue related to this, but it plays out differently in East Boston, and so when the city legislators care about something, it gets a little more noise on Beacon Hill. And so the process that we're going through now, these home rule petitions are still being sent up. Matter of fact, tonight, was it Harwich? I think it was. I was hearing on the radio. One of the towns tonight is going to vote on it on the Cape to send a home rule petition up. I don't think that the home rule petitions individually are going to get a lot of traction individually. I think what will come out is this committee's recommendations to come up with a comprehensive option, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see an option where we'd go back to the communities and they would vote yes or no on the option, and the time horizon would be this session. I think maybe in the fall.
Thank you. Okay.
That was definitely an easy one, but you will see this happen. This is something that has been, fully vetted in the sense that, I mean, things have changed dramatically just over the last 2 years.
Okay.
I think 2 years ago, if you had asked me Airbnb, I was kind of like, I've heard it, but I don't know too much about it. Now it's in everybody's lexicon. They understand the world has changed in that regard, and this is us catching up with technology, and because of that, you're going to see that change, and that's going to happen. The very thing that you're looking for, I think you'll see happen this year. So thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate the softball.
You finally caught up with Uber. Now we got it.
Right.
Our last question.
And Airbnb supports it.
And you're going to be
it's
much
rare.
less, right? Apparently, look at that.
Good evening. You're always looking.
So I was actually hoping to put forth a couple of questions about both 1225 and 1305, but I'm just going to focus on 1305 for this one. I'm not going to be as easy as Peter, though. I'm going to make you guys think a little bit, but this is for all of you. So regarding 1305, all of you had very different answers, and so I first want to start with Senator de Macedo.
Can you just remind us what it is? Because there's 5,000.
Sorry.
Nothing
Safe communities. And well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. I really enjoy this forum, and this has been a wonderful conversation. So I want to make you guys think a little bit, maybe even collaborate a little bit. But first of all, you spoke about how you were worried about the slippery slope of bringing in immigrants from everywhere, just opening our borders, all of that, and that was a big concern of yours for that bill. And I'd say, the slippery slope, I think, is a worry for us on my side of the issue as well, in that, as Jarita brought up, discrimination, racial profiling, having those things enter our community. And so I just want to say I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think anybody working for this bill is asking for open borders, is asking for any less vetting than we currently see on the national level for immigrants. And this kind of gave me the thought was when you, Representative Vieira, spoke about how you support, we all support the goal. We all want safe communities. We all want our, you all want your constituents to, be safe. But you said the reason that you do not support this primarily is because of the power that it takes away from the local officials and the state or federal officials to collaborate in such a case as a terror threat. So you guys all have the power to, to put forth amendments to bills, to not take a bill as outright, but to see what you might like and what you don't like in it. So I want to ask all three of you, first those of you in opposition, to just recognize the parts of the bill that you are in support of and where you might be willing to give a bit or something you might add to it or take away to make it passable from your point of view. And Dylan, you're not off the hook on this one. You have to, I would like you to look for a part of the bill that you would be willing to concede to them, or the folks on the other side of the aisle will say, to see some sort of bill similar to this move forward and us work for the common goal of safer communities and protecting our constituents without removing the power of collaboration between local and national officials and things like that. So this is the last one. It's a little bit more free form, and thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful question. I appreciate it. Please sit down. I don't think I'm that far away in the sense that I'm concerned about the fact that we will be perceived as a place to come if you've violated the law. I do not want somebody who's here and has overstayed their visa and they're working somewhere and they're, we all know them, and I'm not speaking out of it. I don't want somebody to be picked up and dragged out of this country. That concerns me. That's why I talk about the broader aspect of immigration policy. We can solve this issue now, and I want to see that happen. So it's because of the fact that we don't have a national policy that we're trying to address something that I'm concerned in regards to the fact that it says that you don't have to you don't have to protect the laws. I'm worried about the criminals that are the people who have been arrested for something that is violating the law in per se a felony or something to that effect, that should be if they've done something and then it goes to and they don't have documentation that would go to the INS. I think we agree on that. So we're not it sounds like we're not so far apart. I hope that I'm clear in the sense that I don't want somebody that just happens to be here who's overstayed their visa and has been here and is working and has been trying to go through the process of becoming immigrants. And I hear this all the time, that they've been trying to go through and and they've been ripped off by attorneys that have promised them something that's not there, and they've been trying to go through the process and they're in there. I don't want to see that happen, and I will work to do everything I can to protect those individuals. But people who have felonies and violate the law, if there's a concern or question, I think that that's something that we should try to have a conversation. So I guess again, I don't think that we're too far off. Then there's a lot of conversation because of the national rhetoric that I'm disappointed with. I'll be honest, I'm disappointed with it. So I don't think we're that far off. And so, if I can find common ground, I think that I could speak pretty well to the issue because of maybe because of my background, and I can try to find that balance. I don't think I'm that far off from where you're at. If it's an issue of a felony and you and I are in the same place, then maybe we're not so far off and we can try to get there. So thank you for that very thoughtful question. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can find some consensus. But I am concerned about just saying that you can break the law here. We're a nation governed under the law, and that's kind of my concern.
And I think I want us to sort of just take a little snapshot of the handful of bills that we've talked about tonight. Because I think this really, and this is when we would sit in the basement of Town Hall as a smaller group and have these discussions, it was sort of eye-opening around process and really what we as legislators do. As we've said, all three of us have said that there's over 6,000 bills now between the House and the Senate that are filed. And each of you are here to advocate for one or two or a few of them. And that's important because as legislators, when we hear from our constituents that these bills, 1305 now, I know the number now, right? I heard Safe Communities, we had some briefing papers on it. It hasn't had a hearing, it hasn't even made it to the committee floor, but it's a bill that's up there. And it's a bill that a lot of folks in the community are concerned about. And so when we're sitting there with this, it's called LAWS, the Legislative Automated Work System. When you sit there in LAWS, you got to click, and it's a slow system. It takes a while for it to come up. So I click and I wait for 1305 to come up, and then I get 1305, and it tells me it's not even scheduled for a hearing yet, which means there's nothing that we're really going to do about it unless we start to hear that there's energy around discussing the bill to go to the committee to either request the hearing to happen in a more expedited fashion or to monitor when the hearing comes up to participate either in writing like we did today for the Housing Court or if we're able to be in Boston at the day for the hearing. And so with the Safe Communities Act, from my understanding of what we were briefed early on to co-sponsor bills, you get 2 weeks, by the way. We put all of these bills into the system in a week and a half, 5,000 bills in the House and a couple thousand in the Senate. Then you get 2 weeks to go through and to co-sponsor, and then the system shuts co-sponsorship down, and off you go to the races to get ready for the state budget, right?
He's really good at it.
And he somehow figured out how to get on. He must be on Open Cape. He's got like a high-speed internet connection. But this is where so Dylan, on many of these bills, has heard from his constituents early on in that process to know what the numbers are, to know that they were filed, and to work with them. So I'm already building more and more rapport, not only from the working relationship we have on the floor and on the committee structure that Representative Fernandez and I have, but to see that he is, at the beginning of his first term, at the beginning of the legislative process, taking the community input as he's looking at where do I put my focus. Now, I can't go through 1305 and break out all the subsections, but the principle of prohibiting a local law enforcement agency from enforcing law, whether it's state or federal law, is just against my grain as the ranking member of the Public Safety Homeland Security Committee that these law enforcement agencies should work together. That's different than saying, do they have directed patrols? Anybody know what a directed patrol is? No, I understand, but that's what I'm saying is we need to get into that. No, you actually came to my office. Yeah. And
don't tell me you didn't know about this, because.
I do know about the bill. I do know about the bill. But I didn't know about,
Misquoting it, too.
but I did not know about the bill during the 2-week co-sponsorship deadline.
It's now you're on the Joint Committee for Homeland Security or Safety and Homeland Security.
Yes.
That's where the bill is right now.
There are no, if you listen to what I said at the beginning, when we talked about committee work, the Homeland Security Public Safety Committee has had no hearings. No bills have moved forward to the members of the committee. So they're in the computer system, but so Chairman Naughton, along with Chairman Timmelty, have to schedule a meeting of which a series of bills will be released on an agenda, and that's when the members then come into the hearings to review the bills, to get the briefing packets, and you can come up and testify on the bills. No, I'm not misquoting it. I'm saying I haven't read it in detail. That's what I was trying to say to this gentleman. Yes, and there was a medical emergency. And we did call you, and we did get the packet that was left in the folder. I'm sorry if medical emergencies come up when you have a family. We talked about family medical leave, and I have not read the entire bill. No, I did get the briefing packet. Okay? So, back to where we were at. So, when the bill comes before the committee, what we'll do is we'll have the public hearing, and after the public hearing, the committee will then decide whether or not to release the bill or to redraft it. And many of these bills are redrafted during the committee process. And that is the time when folks like myself that are on 3 committees, and right now we're focused on bonding and Chapter 90 and MBTA, when this comes through, that's when we will look to influence the process, to figure out what changes might we want to put in here to have a positive release. And we'll tell the chairman, if these provisions are in the bill, we'll vote in favor of ought to release. If these provisions are not in it, we might vote against it. Or if certain things are changed, we might do what's called reserving our rights. So you have 3 options when a committee bill comes through. To reserve your right means you're not voting against it because some changes have been made, but it's not quite where you want to go. And then we move to the floor amendments to try to get the bill to a point where we can vote in favor of the bill on the floor. And so the negotiation process in the committee portion will be when the committee chairs schedule the hearing, we get the full briefing packet, we go in, we listen to lobbyists, we listen to constituents, we listen to advocates, anybody that comes to Boston that day, and then we have a written record that we can review of folks that can't make it to Boston that submit written testimony, and then through that process we work with the chairman as to what we think is going to be released. And so that's where my commitment is now, is to working, once the bill is properly before the committee for the hearing, to working on that, and let's reschedule another meeting. I know you were up there with the group with Mira that day. We could set another meeting right here in Falmouth to get more into detail of it as we're doing that, okay? We can do that.
I really have to be aware of when we have to close this building, so I'm going to ask that if you could each say a few words, then we really need to get out of the building because there's things I have to put away and they have to be closed by a certain time, and we need to move along.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll start. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I think this has been a really terrific dialogue. It's terrific to hear back from the community, to get to David's point. Our jobs are to take your concerns, your voices to the State House, so this is a really important dialogue for us. My office is always here for you. We're incredibly accessible. You can call us, email us anytime. We have a terrific staff that makes me look good on a daily basis, and they're here to serve you. And we've worked on a number of constituent issues already. So give us a call. The number is right on the legislator website. Call us, email us. I check my email pretty religiously. So shoot me a note if you ever have any questions.
Can you give him your cell phone number too?
My cell phone number is literally still on my website. Still on the front page of my website. So people call my cell all the time still, which is great. I mean, it's there for a reason. So, and that's because I think transparency, accountability, accessibility are all the kind of foundation of good government. So we're here for you. Our focus, we focus on a lot of statewide issues, but we also are really kind of laser focused on Falmouth, what we can do for Falmouth, what is best for our local community. We had a great budget cycle where we secured significant amount of shellfish propagation money for the Cape and Islands. I was able to secure $250,000, a little less than $250,000 for the district, and a portion of that goes to Falmouth in the form of shellfish propagation. Our focus is really local and making sure that we're your voice in the State House and we're here for you. So thank you. Give me a call anytime.
Simply want to, again, thank the League for putting this together. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to have a dialogue, to get an understanding of where you're coming from, what's important. And again, back to my commitment is I have had the privilege of serving only 3 years in this community, but in the legislature for 19 years. And I have really enjoyed the opportunity to hear from and work with people to find consensus and to find balance. And it's really been an amazing opportunity. As I said, going back to me, finding consensus and common ground. And compromise is not a dirty word. It's trying to find. It's to your point. How do we get to a place where we can address a legitimate concern and issue in a way that we all can find consensus and common ground? I think that's possible. I appreciate your thoughtful approach to that, because that's what we do every day. I mean, what you see sometimes as a bill, by the time it ever finishes up, it changes quite a bit, because we have to bring everybody's concerns and issues to make that. So if this goes through the process and you find that this thing rolls through, it probably will go through that process of finding that vetting and trying to find that balance. And we've done that on a whole host of issues. I've done it my entire career, and that's what I'm going to commit to all of you. I thank you so much for coming and listening to us. I can't believe we had this big of a crowd, and you're still here at almost 9:30. Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.
I too want to thank the League and Meg for having the idea to put this forum together. My first term was the first time that we had this. Representative Madden was in Mr. Fernandez's seat at the time. And it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to sit down and to have ongoing conversations and dialogue. Tonight I want us to have a little thoughtful reflection and a moment of silence before we leave. This afternoon, the first female district commander of the VFW in Massachusetts history, a T-ticket girl, Rebecca Silva, who served 23 years in the military, served in Iraq, Afghanistan, came back and was active in this community. She helped me in my office found the Veterans Collaborative here on the Cape. And she was out at Smithfield Farm in Hatchville on Friday riding a horse as a way to deal with the PTSD trauma of war. She was 49 years old, and she's upstairs looking down on us tonight. And she had an impact. I saw the impact she had on so many people's lives, veterans, from the collaborative to the nonprofits. And she was taken at too young of an age. So tomorrow night, if anybody's free at sunset, you can meet me down at Bristol Beach, T-ticket, one of Rebecca's favorite beaches. Bring a candle. We'll have the trumpets there. And we'll say thank you to her and thank you to all the men and women who have made sacrifices like Rebecca did. God bless the men and women that put themselves in harm's way so that we can be here in forums like this. And my colleagues and I can go to Boston in forums like the legislature. It may not be exactly how we want it, but it's still the greatest and freest country in the world. And it's because of folks like Rebecca Silva. And let's have a moment of silence for her. And I'm sorry if I was a little hot under the collar, but I've been dealing with that all day since 1:30.
Okay. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Margaret, for putting this on.